What's up, investing legends? Today we welcome Dr. Nkem Ezeamama to the program. Dr. Ezeamama is an emergency medical doctor by trade, and after many years in the medical profession, found her way into real estate syndications. After investing as a limited partner in several real estate multifamily syndications, she eventually founded Phoenix Capital, a real estate multifamily investment group that specializes in real estate acquisitions in the Southeast. Dr. Nkem and I share a passion for educating the hordes of doctors and other medical professionals out there that lack the fundamental knowledge when it comes to alternative investments. And in this episode, Dr. Nkem starts off by explaining why so many doctors and medical professionals are financially illiterate and how she was able to break free from that matrix and not only become aware of real estate syndications as a possibility, but ultimately taking that first step and investing into her first real estate syndication. Later on in the episode, Nkem describes her journey from LP to GP and why she recommends that most physicians start out as a limited partner in some deals before venturing into becoming a sponsor themselves. And finally, we conclude the episode with Nkem detailing some of the trends that she's seeing in the multifamily sector and why she thinks now is the time to make deals happen before interest rates start coming down. Dr. Ezeamama is so full of knowledge and wisdom on this episode, and her energy is absolutely infectious. So if you're a physician or a medical professional, or you're just a professional that's looking to break free from the matrix and take control of your investing journey, this episode's for you. So without further ado, everyone, let's welcome to the program, Dr. Ezeamama.
Welcome to the Investing Secrets Podcast.
Dr. Nkem, welcome to the Investing Secrets Podcast. So great to have you here.
I'm so excited to be here, Danny. Thank you for having me. It took us a while for us to make this happen, but it's happening. So I'm really excited.
I know. Well, I know that we connected on LinkedIn many months ago, and I was like, hey, I gotta have you on my podcast. And here we are. Finally, we've made it.
We're doing it.
So you ready to step inside the vault with me?
I am so excited.
Let's go. Love it. So first of all, you are a practicing physician.
I am.
And are also a real estate investor, a active sponsor. So would love to hear what medicine, like type of medicine you practice. I want to kind of understand like who Dr. Nkem is outside of just like the multifamily space.
Okay. I would love to share that. So, and again, thank you so much for having me. My path started off like a lot of other people. And what I mean by that is from a young age, I wanted to be a doctor.
Yep.
I just loved the idea of taking care of people, of being in that part of their lives, right? And so I worked hard. I was always that kid that like my parents didn't need to motivate me. I studied all the time.
Love it.
And I did it, right? I went to med school. And then when it was time to pick something, I enjoyed everything. I enjoyed a little bit of everything. And I enjoyed kind of the rush and the chase. And so I ended up in the emergency room. And for me, the ER, you never know what you're going to get. I can be working a day where I will deliver a baby. And I can be working a day where I will, run CPR on a code and maybe I don't get that person back and that person dies. So beginning of life, end of life, very sick, not sick, all sorts, right? A call for someone who is, I'm putting on life support. I'm telling their family, like, we got to make sure everything is in order. So also I span the gamut, right? And I loved it. I really enjoyed that part of medicine, to play a role in someone's life, to like high five a little kid and to hug a grandma, just the whole spectrum. And so I started doing that, right? And I always thought that was going to be my path. I always thought that for as long as I live, I'm going to be in the ER and that's it's what I was going to do. But somewhere along the line, we got bought over by a private equity group, and medicine just continued to morph. And for me, right, as I watched it, right, it became less of patient care and more about the business of medicine. So, we started seeing all these metrics and just a lot of things, right? And before I knew it, right, they started maybe cutting hours, and it was like cutting hours within reason. So, like, how are you performing this week? You haven't seen as many number of patients. We got to cut hours here. And I just thought there has to be more, right? And at some point, right, it even got to the point where I thought job security. I thought if there was a field in life that had job security, it would be medicine. Yeah. And it's not the case. It's not necessarily the case, right? Yeah. There are physicians who are getting fired. And so one day, and I'm fortunate I haven't experienced any of that, but one day I thought, if they can do it to the colleagues sitting next to me, I'm not exempt. And I needed to figure out a way to kind of protect myself, to protect my family, to think bigger, right? And I had to stop relying on my 9 to 5, even though my 9 to 5 was really good, right? In terms of pay, I had to stop relying on that. And I needed to think about diversification. And I needed to think outside of just relying on one source of income. And that's honestly where real estate came in. I truly was just a passive investor. I was just investing, and I'd work hard in the ER, and I would take some money and I would invest it in apartment complexes. But then the more I started doing it, right, I wanted to take ownership. I wanted to learn about really what my money was doing. So I started attending real estate conferences. And what I started noticing is that there weren't a lot of us in the space. There weren't a lot of healthcare professionals, because the idea is that we were experts in medicine and everything else we kind of outsourced, and we outsourced our money so quickly that we don't know anything. Like we don't know how to think about investing. We don't know how to think about, like alternative assets. We don't know what to do with our 401k. We just don't know. And so I thought at that point that I would start educating physicians and healthcare professionals and nurses and pharmacists and dentists. And I would just tell them my story, right? I was this woman who was doing medicine, and I'm a doctor, and this is all I know, but now I'm venturing into real estate. What I did not know and I did not realize was that there are others like me out there. There were others who wanted more and didn't know what that looked like, and they were just looking for the right person, right? To partner, to link arms with, to grow it. And so I started just educating, and I started seeing, and I started sharing on LinkedIn. LinkedIn has been a significant source of growth for me, growth in like capital, growth in like personal mindset, in like, being vulnerable. All of that happened on LinkedIn for me. And so I started sharing my story. And what I didn't realize is that there would be other healthcare professionals who would say, hey, find me the deal. Let's partner together. Like we can do it. We can infiltrate the space. And that's how it started. And before I knew it, I raised $700,000. We bought a deal. Before I knew it, we raised $2 million. We bought another deal. And then it just kept going from there. And so the story, I think, is a beautiful story, because I have learned that everybody has a pain, right? And if you can speak to that and bring value and pour value into that, like the reward is immense. And that's kind of been my story. So I never woke up. I never thought in my life, if you asked me 10 years ago, like, right, would I be a real estate investor today? Like the answer, I would be like, I don't even know what that means. Like, all I knew was I was going to be a doctor. And then life has a way of, lifing is the best way I can think about it. And, the path opened up, and I have, my biggest joy, Danny, is that I've been able to educate investors. I've been able to empower investors to go ask questions, to say, hey, what am I doing with my money? What does freedom look like? What are my goals in the next 5, 10 years, right? Like not everybody is going to be like me that pivots out of medicine or like finds an alternative path. That's not everyone's story. But the story and the likelihood is that they want to be in medicine. They love what they do, but they want their money to be working for them outside of medicine. So like, how can they be diversified? And real estate is like a beautiful way to do that, and to think about how you can have ownership. So long story short, right? That's kind of my story, was from a place of pain that then turned into something that I grew into. And then I started bringing others and saying, you know what, there's space, there's a seat at the table for us. This is what it looks like. Let's do it together.
Why do you think so many medical professionals, and we'll put doctors, nurses, all the whole medical industry, right? Why do you think so many in the medical industry are financially illiterate, is maybe the best way to put it?
There's nothing wrong with saying that. The truth is that medicine is to be able to take care of a human, right? To be able to pour into a human, to be able to care for a human, right? It is a big deal, right? Yep. Like
Absolutely.
Danny, in real estate or in anything else, right? You can make a mistake, and we will say, like, we need to make all the mistakes in the world in order to learn, right? In order to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're going to make all the mistakes you need to make so that you can get to the right deal, right? But as physicians, as healthcare professionals, we can't afford to make mistakes. Like, lives are at stake. And so we pour every ounce of learning into medicine. And as expected, right? Like, we get this one life to live. You want your doctor to be the best. You want your nurse to be at your bedside. Like, you want your pharmacist to know everything about every medicine. You want your dentist to be able to look at your teeth and do it well, right? You want that. And so there is maybe not room, or in the past, there hasn't been room for financial education, for what to do after life, for practicing, to own a business in medicine, like the business of medicine, learn how to own your own practice, to be a business, to be an entrepreneur in medicine. Nobody taught us that. There hasn't been any space for any of that. We are truly experts in medicine, and we are, better words, we're illiterate in every other aspect. And so I don't blame our predecessors. I don't blame the people who taught us, our educators. But I do think that where we are today, we need to make room for that, right? You can be an expert physician, but you can also learn about, like, starting a business. Like, you can learn about starting a practice, right? You can learn about, like, how to be an investor. You can learn about whatever it is that you want to learn about outside of medicine. I think there can be space to learn it while you're learning medicine. It doesn't take away from, like, the expertise that you need in medicine, but I think it makes you a well-rounded human when you get out of medicine, or when you finish training and you're, like, into the real world.
I've never heard, and I've spoken to many physicians about this very subject, and I've never heard anyone explain it the way that you did, which makes so much sense, because, like, let's take away the fact that, for a second, let's just pretend that doctors don't work 24/7, 365, which they do, and literally have no time, which is that's actually, like, the most common
100%
excuse/reason people say, oh, well, they don't have time to learn, which in and of itself makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But what you just said right now is an absolute dime, which is your entire career. Like, you have been indoctrinated into this belief system. I cannot make a mistake. I cannot make a mistake, because you can't.
You can't. Someone will die if you make a mistake.
Right.
And that's not like an if. It could happen.
And so it makes perfect sense why that same philosophy then gets translated into their investment philosophies. I can't make a mistake. Analysis paralysis. I'll just go with what everyone tells me to do, or I'll outsource it to another professional, aka financial advisor, who is financially incentivized to only put me into a set box and nothing else.
Yeah.
Right?
We are the most risk-averse group of people, right? And I think that has helped me, because I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for the background that I have, because there has been a layer of trust that has been built, just a foundational trust, when I speak to another healthcare professional about investing, about real estate, about my journey, right? It's just like they're sitting with their own, right? And so it's like, oh, how did you do this? Like, how did you even think about doing this? And I just lay out, this was my path, right? Like, I remember the first time I posted on LinkedIn, and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to work in the morning, and in the evening, I'm underwriting a deal. Like, I don't even know what that means, but I'm doing it, right? And so, like, and it's true. Like, I told myself, like, if I can go to med school, like, I can learn Excel, I can, like, underwrite deals, I can make assumptions. Like, that is, like, that
Absolutely.
was like, and I shared that, right? I shared that, and that was the conversations that I was having. But you are right? We are, we don't know who to trust. We don't know who to lean on. And so seeing someone else who has kind of gone the path, trying to figure it out, being open about it and saying, join me on this journey, right? The response has been so beautiful, so gratifying. And it's just like, okay, yeah, let's do this together. Like, I'll make mistakes, but, like, I'm going to show you all the things I've done, all the steps I've taken, right, to get me to where I am today. And my ask is, hey, let's link arms together. Let's try to do this together. Let's figure out this path and make space for us where there's no space.
So this leads me to a couple questions. And the first one is, because financial literacy is so low in the medical space, because you are so risk averse as a community, how is it that you lucked out and found your way into investing as an LP into an apartment deal? Like, how did you even, because to be honest with you, in my experience, the knowledge gap, or like the activation energy is in the knowledge gap.
Yeah.
Number one, most don't even know that these sorts of investments are accessible and possible. So you actually got lucky, right? In some ways, right? You got exposure to that. How did that happen?
Okay. Oh man, I am enjoying this because you're asking such good questions as to how all of this started. And I will say this, right? I didn't just jump right in, right? I stood at the sidelines for a really long time because I didn't trust, because I was like, sounds like another Ponzi scheme. But this is where it's true. Like, that's exactly what I thought. But where it hit me was this. Where I was going, I was so desperate for change, right? Mm-hmm. That I thought to myself, I said, I have to do something different. And that something different was taking a risk. And I thought to myself, if I take this risk and it works out, then I could win big, right? And that was my initial thought. And I thought, if I failed, right, then I would have said, I did my best and I tried. And if I lost money, right, because in investing, you're taking a risk. This was the thing that, and I say this with a level of humility and gratitude. But if I lost that money, I would go right back to work and I would work a few shifts and I would make it back. And not a lot of people can say that, right? Not a lot of people have disposable income that they can build up to the point that, like, not a lot of people have jobs that they can rely on that gives them an opportunity to invest in alternative assets, right? Yep. And so I was very grateful for that opportunity, but that gave me a little bit more freedom to go out and try, right? Because I was just like, I cannot keep relying, like, and you, in the emergency room, I want to just kind of paint a picture for you, right? You have access to the emergency room 24 hours a day, which means somebody has to be in the emergency room 24 hours a day waiting for you. And that means that some days I'm driving home at 3 a.m. in the morning, right? And and some days I'm driving home at midnight. And some days I'm heading into work at 10 p.m. at night and I'm leaving at 6 a.m. That is the reality of what I did, right? And so thinking about the future, right? I was thinking, well, what type of future is that going to lead for me in the world? So there was all these thoughts that made me think that I was at a defining point where I thought, if I try to invest and it doesn't work, you know what? I put my best foot forward. But if I tried this and it opens another door, which it did, right? Then I would be the better person for it. Yeah. That was like my thought process in when I did this. And then when you talk about, you said something so powerful you don't understand. And I tell this to all my investors. My heart is to bring access. You know why? Because we have the resources, right? We have the disposable income. But we don't have the access. We don't know who to trust. We don't know who to talk to. We don't. Right. And so a big strategy that has worked for me is that I meet them where they are. So I'll go to conferences. I'll go to physician conferences. I'll go to healthcare professionals, and I'll just say, this is who I am. This is what Phoenix is. Jump in on a webinar, like, come hear a story about passive investing 101. What does that mean for you? Right. And so and that's how I got in, right? I was looking a little bit. I joined a webinar. I listened. I heard some people at a conference, and that's how so I'm not doing something magical that I didn't see or that I didn't live personally. Right. Again, when you have this hard pain, and you're like, I want to figure out a solution, right? You start looking and the doors start opening for you. And that was my story. And so that's why when I meet people who are telling me the stories that I've lived, I find it funny because it's like, of course, you started looking and then I showed up. I was always there, but you started looking and here I was. So that's kind of the story of the question that you asked about how, I was searching. I didn't jump right in, right? I was very risk averse. I asked, you have no idea. the operators, like I almost, if not coming short of doing a background check on them, like I asked, they introduced me to at least like 5 of their investors, and I like grilled them on every single question that you could think of. And like, they must have thought like, seriously, all you're investing is 100,000, like take the money somewhere else. But for me, it was important, and they knew that they understood that I needed to build trust. So like, I will have conversations with physician investors, with healthcare professionals, and I'll have the same conversation 4 times. And I'm like, I see their name on my calendar again, and I'm like, yes, I'll listen. But that, I hope that kind of answers your question and shed some light on what you were thinking.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely does. So how did you first find out about it though? Like, how did you said you had some sponsors that you talked to. So like,
yes.
Did they reach out to you? Did you reach out to them?
No, I met them. I met them at a conference.
Okay.
And that was one thing. So conference is where, and then I started after the conference, right? It kind of opened my mind. So then I joined a bunch of groups on Facebook, a bunch of like physician investor groups, like outside of your 9-to-5 groups. Like I just started looking, right? Because again, I had a question, I had a need, I had a hole that I wanted to fill. So then I started doing the research, but my mind was now open to the idea and the possibility. That's really how it started.
That's super interesting. I'm writing some notes right now. I'm like, I gotta write all this down. Okay. And you met them at a conference. I'm assuming that they were like, they had like a booth or something, or like a sponsor like booth or something at the conference. And that's a smart way to kind of get it in front of physicians at scale, right? Makes a lot of sense to me. Okay. So yeah. And what, so serendipitous, right? Like they were there, you were there, and then, they found the right person at the right time that was looking to kind of make a shift. And that, I'm assuming, was a multifamily deal.
Yes.
Okay. And now, Nkem, you've gone from LP to now general partner and sponsoring deals. Yes. Walk me through the mindset shift and the various like phases of the evolution of the investor.
I would say this is probably the hardest for me, and I'll tell you why. Because for a long time, I was only known as Dr. Nkem, and that was who I based all my identity on, right? And so the first thing that I had to do was realize that it was okay to shed that and realize that I could be Dr. Nkem. I could also be the CEO and founder of Phoenix. I could also be a sister. I could also, whatever it is, right? Like I could also be an author. I could be a speaker, like I could empower people. And so I had to shed that mindset of that, like my identity, my entire identity was rooted in medicine. Now, it's very warranted because like I spent the last 14 years of my life working towards this goal. And then I spent longer than that in it, right? And so that's all I knew. That was the only woman that I had reconciled with. And so the first thing that I had to do was shed that, right? Not that there was anything wrong with that. I love being a doctor, and I love the doors that it's open. I love the person that I've become on that path, because that path was hard, but I allowed myself the opportunity to be, Dr. Nkem, the real estate investor, the motivational speaker, the person who writes books. And I know I could, and the second I did that, right, the doors started opening, right? And then I realized that I can do this. And so, and also in doing that, right, I was shedding that imposter syndrome, that the only thing I was good at was medicine, right? Yep. Like I used to think that like, how can I manage money, right? I used to think, how can I pull investors together, right? The idea of raising $1 million, it seemed like only the likes of Bezos could do it, right? Like I was like, that's not even possible. And now, where we are, and each deal are doing almost 3 million. And so like that blows my mind, because I never thought, if you had asked me, Danny, like what does that even mean? Like, I'd be like, how do I get $10 from someone? Right. But again, right, it goes to the idea of when you can give value to someone, when you can meet them at their point of pain and say, this is how to solve this problem, then it's an exchange, right? And so that's kind of how I thought. So to kind of give you the evolution, I had to shed that belief that I was only one thing, right? It was a mindset shift that I realize I could be this, and that's okay, right? And that was the first thing I did. Second thing was I had to, that idea of imposter syndrome, it like limited me because every time I walked into rooms, right, I would think, what am I doing here, right? Like I walked into a room, I'll never forget. I walked into a room, it was a broker event, and literally it was like filled up with men. I was the only woman that walked, and I stood at the door, and I thought to myself, has anybody seen me? Can I quickly leave? And something was like, you have to push. I'm so serious. Like, you laugh, but like, that's a thought, right?
Yeah.
And it was like, what am I doing here? Like, I might as well go pick up another shift and go to work. Like, what am I doing? But I had to push past that, right? I had to say, you know what? If there is no space for me here, then I have to carve out the space for me and then bring others with me, and that seemed to be my story. And I was very okay with it, right? But I had to work on a lot of that. It was a lot of like self-limiting beliefs on my part. And then another thing I had to do was I had to shut the noise of outsiders, because there were people who kept saying, man, you're doing so well. Like, you're a doctor. Why would you even think about wanting to do this, right? Like, you're set, like your path is. And so because I knew, right, I had this calling and I was going to impact lives, and I was going to hear people's stories and figure out how to, like just how to give them a more balanced life, especially through investing and thinking about their money, right? And so I had to shut down the opinion of others.
Yeah.
I had to shut down the noise, and I just had to keep going. And so that's really, the story really evolved when I thought that there was no space for us, right, as healthcare professionals in this space. And so it started with sharing my story on LinkedIn, and then it started with like doing little webinars here and then. I'm like, come hear my story, come see what we're doing. And that's how it started. And then from there, right, I kept seeing the need, and I kept seeing that there was a need to have us come together. Like, what can we do together? And that togetherness is what led me to building Phoenix. And really, the goal and the heart of Phoenix is like, can we touch every healthcare professional and tell them about alternative investing and tell them about real estate? Like, is that a far-fetched dream? And the answer is no, right? But that's really how it starts. So it was really from a place of need, a place of pain, and then really figuring out that like, we can do this. And I wanted others to see that it's possible, right? That if I can do it, so can you. And I tell that to my investors all the time. I have a lot of people who reach out to me for advice and like mentorship. And they, the underlying question is like, how did you do this? And I always want to tell them like, right, like, I wasn't any different from you. There was just like a deep-seated pain in me. And I wanted to do everything to fix that. And then I realized that I wasn't the only one with that same problem. And so my heart was like, how can I help others solve that same problem? And that's where it started. Oh, one more thing. I spent time in the beginning, and I'm so grateful for one of my mentors. One of the first books I read was Start With Why. And so I had to sit down and really by Simon Sinek, and I had to sit down and figure out my why. Like, why was I thinking about pivoting from medicine? Why did I think that I could lead people? Like, why did I think I was going to make an impact? And I learned something so powerful. When I figured out the why, the how, and the what, and the who just started falling into place. But I had a solid why. And the more important reason, like for someone who's listening, this is so important because this journey has been so difficult. And I'm not going to sometimes it was easier for me to stay in medicine, right, than to build Phoenix. It was so hard. The amount of no's that I heard, the amount of like, oh, no, well, I don't want this. This is not for us. Like, the amount of no's that I heard, it would have stopped me if I did not have my why so cemented. And so I'm so grateful for my mentor who he made me, Danny, he would not let me meet with him again until I finished that book, until I spent time writing out why I was doing this, how I was I didn't meet with him for almost a month and a half and we were meeting regularly. We were meeting bi-weekly and sometimes every Friday. He said, you cannot meet with me again until you read this book. I want you to sit down and really write down your why. And then in line with that, write down your new purpose, right? That you're shifting write down your new purpose. And I could not meet with him. And I reached out one time thinking he forgot, and he goes, I don't have it yet, which means we're not meeting. And I was like, okay. Then I took him seriously. I read the book. And so that was like a big game changer because, like, again, you know, as an entrepreneur, this journey is so hard. Like, it is so difficult. And, you know, and I don't want to add on the layer to being a woman and everything else that comes with that, right? It's hard. But when I did that, right, when the days were hard, when I'd sit in this office and crying, I would remember that. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to push through. So that's kind of the evolution of where I was, how I got here, and where I'm going.
I love that. And I think that there's so many lessons that you learned along the way that I have heard other people in your position kind of learn. One thing that I guess one question that I have is, would you recommend that physicians, people in the medical field, would you recommend that they spend some time as an LP before transitioning into being an operator? Or would you say, oh, you know, like if you understand the game and everything, you could probably just like go straight to like being a GP sponsor?
Honestly, I think you have to be an LP, and there are a few people out there who can go straight to the general partnership side. You have the money, you know, you have the resources, you have access, you have a network.
Yeah.
But from my experience, right, being an LP, you know, I would get the financials and I would review it. You know, like I went by myself to look at one of my deals. Like I flew, I was in Charlotte for a business meeting, and then like I drove to go see it. And I, you know, so I learned, but like every month when I got financials, like I was looking through it, I was asking questions. And when we had quarterly meetings, like virtual meetings, right? I showed up there and I asked questions. But as an LP, I understood kind of the process from a kind of high level standpoint. I understood it. And so it took me a little bit of time to like learn that before moving over. It wasn't just like a quick switch, right? I did a few deals as an LP before I moved over to the general partnership side and the ownership side. So I think it's very important, but I don't want to speak to that person who's like, I think I can do it. Maybe they've been watching from the sidelines. They have the resources. They have the network. They can figure this out. They can do some work. You know, like I'm not speaking to that person because I think that person is the exception and not the rule. I think that for most others, right, I think it starts with being an LP because there's so many nuances of this that you don't understand, right? Like even till today, like I don't want to say like I'm like the best at this, but like you think about like when you start being on the general partnership side of the ownership side, right? You think about acquisition. So like then you think about broker relations. How do I find the deal? After that, you think about underwriting the deal, right? How many deals do you underwrite? How many offers are you putting in? You start thinking about even in that phase, right? Building relationships with property managers, with accountants, with insurance, with the insurance team, with lenders, with legal, you know, like all of that stuff is happening. Then you buy the deal. Then you start looking for capital, right? Because like these are not small deals. So then it's like, where's the capital coming from? Do we have preferred equity partners? Who are our retail investors, right? You're thinking about that. At the end of the day, after you buy the deal, right? You're thinking, how are we going to start managing this? Because buying the deal is one thing. Managing it is another thing. So like all of this, you can't learn all of this day zero, right? Especially because you're a physician and you've been doing medicine. So like I said, there might be that 1-2 people who can do it, but for the most part, and I'm speaking from kind of my experience, it makes sense to be on the LP side. And eventually, if this is what you want to do, transition.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense because as an LP, sure, you don't get to see the whole thing, right? You don't understand all of the nuances, but you are at least looped in enough to understand what responsibilities are going to fall on you, you know, if you want to kind of take on the entire project. Now, Nkem, the current strategy that you use, let's talk about the assets that you're investing into right now. You're concentrated primarily in the Southeast market where you're at, or are you diversified, or where?
Truly looking forward, most of our deals are in the Southeast. And the truth is, and the reason why is one, proximity, but it's more than that. It's truly looking at market analysis. So I nothing against the West. But if you kind of notice
no offense taken. So
if you look at migration trends, right, you notice that more people are moving to the South. Jobs are moving, Meta's coming to Georgia. Rivian just is moving to Georgia. There's a lot of kind of migration patterns that are heading that way. And when jobs move that way, people move, right? And so it's kind of looking at that. If you also look at some more trends, right? Like the Southeast is more landlord friendly, right? And so like you have the opportunity to do this. When you think about rent control, it's not as common, if barely any, right? So you're thinking about from the investor mindset, it seems like it's better to kind of do deals here. Now, we have a deal in the Midwest. And so one of my earlier deals are in the Midwest, and it's doing well, but kind of forward looking and thinking, the Southeast is where we want to kind of really grow roots.
Yeah. What are you seeing right now in the multifamily space? Because, truthfully, there's quite a bit there's not a consensus, I would say, on what's happening right now. I've talked to many sponsors that are like, everything is great and things are amazing. And then, I talk to others that are like, things are not so great and things are not so amazing. And so I'm curious to hear what your take is on where we're at with the current state of affairs in the multifamily sector.
So this is what I think, right? I think that years ago, right? So think like COVID era, right? Where interest was so cheap, right? And people were just buying and bridge debt and all of that, right? And now we see that they're kind of paying for it, right? Because those deals are struggling. The market that we're in right now, to me, it seems like competition is less, number one. And number two, sellers have a more realistic opinion of what they should be selling these assets for. And so it's a little bit more feasible as opposed to a few years ago where interest rates were so low that like it was truly a seller's market. They could name any price and find someone who would buy it, and it didn't make any sense, right? Yeah. And so deals are still penciling, right? Now, it's not as much, right? Deal flow is picking back up this year, a lot more than last year. So deal flow is picking back up. Interest rates are coming down a little bit. The most recent deal we did, we got an interest rate of 5.1, and that was fixed, right? And that was brand new deal, brand new originated loan. So we're still getting, where interest rates are not as high as they were last year. So they're coming down, but there's still not as much competition in the market. So I'm seeing it still as a really good time. Deals are penciling a little bit better now than they were last year. Like last year, when I was looking at deals, right, I was like, my spread was like 25, 30%, and I just couldn't make any of the numbers work. And now this year, it's looking more like 10%. 13%, right? And so like we can have conversations now with the broker and say, this is where we're landing. Can we do this and that to make it better? And so we're able to put in a bit more offers now. And so that's where I see the market going, right? I think next year interest rates will go down a little bit more. And I think that there'll be more buyers in the market. So for those people who are like on the sidelines, with the right deal, the right operators, I still think that there's a market to invest. There's a market to buy. But you just have to be churning out deals. You need to be making offers, but you have to be underwriting, right? So, and also a lot of deals now, right? Value add, the value add strategy is you have to be very, you have to be very knowledgeable about using value add strategy. And you have to, what I mean by that is really look at where market rent or rent growth is going. Thinking through like CoStar data, right? Rent growth has been a little bit stagnant. So the idea is like, use that to gauge how you want to do your value add strategy. So will you do like significant value add in the beginning where there's not significant rent growth? The answer is probably no. You might acquire these properties and maybe as their cash flow will wait 6 to 9 months or even a year to 15 months before you start like heavy value add strategy to pick up with where rent growth is growing as it's starting to pick back up. So like in our markets, right? Next year, like this year and maybe a little bit of next year, market growth is stagnant, but it's set to pick up. So I think that's like, you really have to understand as a buyer, right? As someone who's underwriting deals, as an operator, you really have to understand the market dynamics and the fundamentals as you're thinking through, is this the right time to buy? Should I be putting in offers? What does that look like for the business? I think that's my take. That's my thought. That's what I'm seeing. And that's the strategy that I'm using.
Yeah. And when you said earlier, because I was, for a second there, when you're saying spread, you were talking about the difference between what your underwriting says is like the top value you should be paying and what the list price is for
price. Yep. That's what I mean. Yes.
For the property. Yeah. I mean, that lines up. I do think that, well, it's just like anything, right? When reality changes, it takes time for the market to adjust and react. And sellers, in my experience too, for basically all of 24, were not being very realistic with their pricing. I don't know what the exact stats are. I probably should, on commercial real estate transactions in 2024, but I have to assume that it was one of the lowest years on record for like overall transaction volume. So I would imagine that's the case.
I spoke with a recent broker in the Atlanta market, and they said what they did Q1 of this year was greater than what they did all of 2024.
I believe that. I definitely believe that. Yeah, it's been a challenging market, but I think people that are for example, you, and I don't know if this happened to you, Nkem, but I know that this happened to a lot of other groups that I work with. They submitted multiple LOIs over the course of like the last 18 months and, or from 2023 and 2024 submitted a lot of LOIs. Now in the last 6 months or so, some of those sellers have come back, right?
Yeah.
But you got to be in the game because they didn't go back to the people that didn't submit LOIs, right? Yeah. If you're silent, and this is one of the things that I remind people, I have to remind sponsors, is like, you might as well put something in to let them know you're interested, or they'll never know. And you might find out later on that it sold for less than what you would have submitted an LOI for. You just didn't know,
Absolutely.
So it's crazy. Nkem, we are running up on time here, and this has been amazing, and just absolutely think that what you're doing is awesome, because as a former pre-med guy, I never got sucked into medicine. I figured out, I was like, oh my gosh, this is not what I want to do. Actually, it's funny because I had several internships during my pre-med days. And one of my internships was at a general practitioner's office who owned his own practice.
Nice.
And basically, I was his assistant, quote unquote, for the summer. And over 75% of his day was spent on the phone with insurance companies.
Yeah. That's crazy.
And I was like, really? And when I sat down, and it's funny because at the end of the summer, I sat down with him and I kind of explained to him what I had observed. I was like, hey, is this really what it's like? And he tells me, he's like, don't do it. It's like, just don't get into medicine. He's like, just don't do it. And I was like, really? And you could just see the look on his face, right? But here's my counter argument to that is like, we need great minds in the medical, I agree. It's such a waste of talent.
I agree.
For you to not do that. And there were other there were other reasons why I decided not to get into medicine too. But that was one of the big ones, was that I just felt like the bureaucracy, and to your point, the business side of it, was getting in the way of the real objective of medicine, which is to keep people healthy, and people who are sick, get them better. So interesting that we kind of share that thought where, the business side is kind of like intruding, and I think we're seeing it right now too. I don't think it's ever been more prevalent, actually. Yeah. Amazing stuff. Dr. Nkem, if they want to get in touch with you, or if anyone who's listening wants to learn more about how to partner with you at Phoenix, how can they do that?
I've said it a few times, right? I love LinkedIn. I am very active on there. You don't have to be. You could just reach out to me. I will definitely get a hold of you and we'll book a call and kind of just talk through. My heart and my goal for anybody who's listening is just, how does this align with your big goal, right? How does this align with your life plans and the plans of your family and freedom and whatever that looks like to you? So I think I enjoy the most is having these conversations and to be able to play a part in that and what that looks like, feels like. We could figure that out. But LinkedIn, and then if you want, you can send me an email. My email is Nkem, so that's my first name, at phcinvest.com. So any of those ways, we have a website. It's on LinkedIn. You see it. But I can also hand it over to Danny and he can give it to you if you want. But the easiest way to get a hold of me, and we're also on every social media platform. So whichever one you're on, if you type my unique name, you'll find me, and then we can definitely connect.
Yes. And speaking of LinkedIn, that's how we found each other. So I think you commented on I commented on one of yours, and then we're now best friends on LinkedIn, but it's taken a long time to get this podcast episode to happen. But I'm just excited that you were able to hop on and come. Yeah, this has been a blast. Before I let you go though, in traditional fashion here, on the Investing Secrets podcast, we're going to have you leave the audience with one final top secret investing secret. Take it away.
Okay. It's not a big secret.
Yeah.
It's really not a big secret. So please don't get too excited. This is more of an inventory. So the best time to have invested, if you ask anyone, was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, whenever they could. But you didn't have that opportunity, right? Because you haven't started. And so the next best time to invest is now. It's today. Don't wait until the year's over and you start thinking about, well, what's next? Because guess what? I am shocked that it is August. And it's not even that it's August. It's August is ending, which means we are now until the end of the year, right? We are on our path, because after this is Labor Day. Then after that, before you know it, is Thanksgiving, and then the year's over. And so I would say that if you had the opportunity to do something, I would say do it today. Get educated, but don't get stuck there. Make a decision, do something, try. If it doesn't work, try again. But the people who have reaped and done so well is because they decided that they were going to invest. They were going to figure this thing out. They were going to try. So, I started 10 years ago. I wish I started before that. But I'm also saying start today. If you start today, you still have 10, 20, 30, 40 years to go, and you'll still reap those benefits. So that's it.
Love it. And it's a great reminder too, right? Because everyone plays the shoulda, coulda, woulda game, right? Yes. Oh, wouldn't it have been nice to, but truthfully, I mean, it's, the best time to start is when you acquire the knowledge, right? And actually, that is the sign of a high performer too, is taking action.
Yes.
Right. As opposed to sitting on the sidelines and just kind of playing the, analysis paralysis game.
Yeah.
I could not agree more. Dr. Nkem, so great to have you on the show, and best of luck to you and everyone over at Phoenix.
Thank you so much, Danny. Thank you for having me. This was a wonderful hour. It flew by, and it's just great conversation.
Same. Likewise.